Thanks for having me here today. And Linda, I just want to say that's one of the best pieces of cake I've had in a long time. Isn't that a great piece of cake? I'm not supposed to have that, you know, how that works. And, you know, I really have to watch my health now because I may not have any health benefits before we... It's really not funny, is it? When you think about it. It's one of the most outrageous things I've ever experienced. But then again, don't get me going. Well, I'm so glad to be here, and it's nice to see. There are a lot of familiar faces here that I know, and not just the NIU crowd who gets to see me all the time, but I see a lot of individuals who have made their contribution to Illinois public higher education, and you've devoted your lives, your professional lives, to serving students and the communities at our state universities. And for some of you, it's decades of commitment. I think it's fair to say, however, that there are a number of changes confronting higher education, and the magnitude and the speed of those changes is perhaps greater now than any other time in the past 50 years, maybe even longer. Some days it just boggles my mind. Perhaps the biggest change of all is that somewhere along the way here, the social contract between our country and higher education has been rewritten. Let me put it more bluntly. I think that contract has been broken. For more than 150 years, we as a nation defined higher education as a public good. Boy, that's really true in Illinois. But today, as the battles rage in state capitals across our nation, higher education is cast as a private benefit instead of the best possible investment in the future of the people of a given state or of our nation. And perhaps the most astounding thing about this situation is that our leaders are choosing to cut spending on higher education when our competitors across the globe are doubling down on their investment. Other nations recognize and embrace the fact that higher education is not only a societal good, but it also is the economic engine. Yeah. Well, meanwhile, here at home, our lawmakers struggle to craft policy in the midst of the worst economic times since the Great Depression, and they are shutting down that engine rather than stepping on the accelerator. Doing so, I believe, is a great disservice. It is a disservice to all of you who have worked to build American higher education into the model that it is, and I think still is, and it's admired around the globe. It's a disservice to our country as it weakens our standing in the global marketplace of the future. And most of all, it's a disservice to the students of today and tomorrow who must compete in that marketplace. So lawmakers say we just don't have enough money for higher education. And, you know, anybody who looks at the state balance sheet, it's hard to argue that point. I mean, that's a fact. But what I will argue, however, is that the double standard, argue about the double standard which universities are painted today. Public universities' budgets in this state have been reduced every year in my presidency, and I'm just ending my 11th and starting my 12th, and they've been cut every year except 3, and 2 of those years they were flat, and 1 there was a modest increase. But the rest has been, it's been cut, and reduced year after year, and then on top of that, having to accommodate the unfunded mandates that, you know, some of them are good public policy, you know, for instance, veterans benefits, tuition remission for veterans, that's a good thing. There's no doubt about it, but we have to pay for it, and it has to come out of something. I could go on the unfunded mandates. At NIU over the past 10 years, it's accumulated to $92 million. So, yes, we've raised tuition. It always pains me to do that. Yes, we have raised tuition, but never at a level that could ever offset dollar for dollar the state general revenue reductions. And I don't need to remind you that only 9 days remain until the end of this fiscal year. Every public university in the state is owed millions of dollars in back payments on our appropriation. At NIU, the state owes us 42% of our fiscal year 2011 appropriation. That doesn't vary, but a percentage point across all of the universities. So here we are, it's a 42% budget cut. That's basically what it was. And even that, the balance didn't come in a predictable way. It drives chief financial officers crazy, and it stresses all those individuals in universities who try and balance the budget and make payroll. That's what we've been doing, basically, is everything we can just to make payroll. Well, we've managed, but you know, after 2 years of it, it's pretty darn frustrating. We've managed. How have we done it? Why and how? Because to not meet payroll or pay our bills would break our contract with our employees. And I'm not talking about an employment contract. I'm talking about that commitment, that promise to our employees, to our students and our families, of the people of the state of Illinois. And that, my friends, it's just unacceptable. Simply put, we will not fail our students, their families, and the taxpayers, our employees, who have entrusted us to provide them with the best possible educational opportunities available. And if reducing the state's commitment to the overall university operating funds is not significant enough, public university employees and annuitants are now faced with the prospect of vast and unprecedented changes to their pension and to their annuitant health care benefits. It's incredibly sad and frightening. You know, we were talking at the table. I grew up on a little farm in Northeast Ohio, and we did a little bit of everything, including having only a little bit of money. And at this time of year, in the spring, Dad would always hire on some of the local high school guys and a few hands that we could rustle up. And every Friday, Mom, after work was done, Mom sat at a little card table out in our backyard and did the payroll, had the checks every Friday. Now, this was true of everyone but my sister and I. You know, our contribution was we were the kids. But you know, there were other things. And I remember one year in particular, I was going to play Little League baseball, and I had my eye on a Stan Musial. I'm a Cubs fan, but a Stan Musial, watch it, baseball mitt, and we were going to start, and Mom said I could have that, but Thursday night she came to me and said, Jano, we were Polish. He says, Jano, I'm sorry we can't get your baseball mitt for you this week. We have to make payroll. I wasn't happy about that, but I wasn't mad at anybody, because I understood that these guys, my high school kids, they worked. We made an agreement with them. They should be paid. Well, you know, it seems as if many individuals in our state legislature and other, maybe they didn't have that lesson. I don't know, or maybe they forgot that lesson, that once you make a deal with somebody, you keep it. So make no mistake, my friends, what happens in Springfield this fall regarding pension reform and annuitant health care policy changes is of critical importance to every employee and annuitant in the state of Illinois. The decisions made by the General Assembly and the governor will be felt for years to come in more ways than one, I believe. It'll be felt both in terms of the changes that may accrue in benefits, but also I think, in the relationship and the respect that exists between employees and government officials. I readily admit that it is really unfair to lay this problem at the feet of employees, people like you and me. After all, in the history of the Illinois pension system, which replaces your eligibility for Social Security, in the history, employees have never failed to pay their share on time. Never. Never. Politicians, however, have repeatedly chosen to defer their constitutionally required contributions. As a result, the Illinois pension system today has an unfunded liability of at least $82 billion. That shortfall is projected to grow to more than $130 billion by 2030 if the system doesn't collapse on itself before that, because people will be leaving the group. Illinois now has the largest unfunded pension obligations of any state in the nation. That bears repeating. The largest unfunded pension obligation of any state in the nation. And our state budget situation is second only to California's nightmare, maybe Greece too. Since 2004, the state has relied on pension obligation bonds to make almost $18 billion in actuarially required pension payments. So they borrowed to pay the costs. By the time the state income tax was increased in the General Assembly this past January, the state budget was so out of balance that the new tax revenues, they do little more than stabilize the state's operating budget. So here is the unavoidable, cold, hard truth. Unless a 25% state pension contribution level is maintained for the next 34 years, the state's pension obligations and unfunded liabilities will continue to escalate exponentially. And if the state had paid every year as it was supposed to, their payment is about 11.5%, and the 25% is the 13 or 14% that they need for those 35 years to get us, get the liability down. There is simply no easy answer for the state. Our leaders are our employees or annuitants. Our pension plans cannot earn their way out of financial stress. Furthermore, it's impossible for any rational person to believe that the state will contribute its 25% every year for the next 34 years to eliminate the funding deficiency. I don't know anybody who would believe that. Therefore, the only option left for policymakers appears to be a reduction in benefits. Now, lawmakers are also looking at other changes that will affect university employees and annuitants, including, and you know the list, increasing insurance contributions for employees, compelling retirees to pay for health insurance, taxing retirement benefits, recalculating cost of living for retirees, even though most have no Social Security, so therefore no COLA available, and even things like eliminating the partial tuition waivers for dependents of university employees, which is a good thing. You know, and I think the most incredible of all that is the health care and health insurance fiasco of last week, and the incredible sad emails that I get from annuitants, particularly those who are out of state, who have been denied from their physicians and their clinicians treatment unless they pay up front, because they know of the reputation of Illinois. This is not good. The CSRS Defined Benefit Program for university and community college employees was established in 1941. Most of you probably know that. When consistently funded, defined benefit programs are stable, affordable pension plans especially for employees who do not participate in Social Security. Then they work. Pension funds require three funding components: the employer contributions, employee contributions, and the return on assets from fund investments. That makes it work. In most states, employer contributions are paid directly by the employing universities. So it's not the state, it's the university. In 1967, the state of Illinois assumed central responsibility for payment of employer contributions to the public pension systems, including the CSRS. By 1970, okay, 3 years later, the likelihood that Illinois would not fulfill the funding requirements was already apparent, and Article 13 of the Constitution, the so-called Pension Protection Clause, thank God, was added to the state constitution. Since that time, Illinois' historical record of skipping, diverting, and delaying actuarially required pension fund payments is unrivaled throughout the nation. For CSRS participants, where retirement contributions replace Social Security, there is no retirement safety net. That's it, in the event of retirement benefits are not being paid by the state. So I suggest to you today that what we are experiencing now is a perfect example of the law of unintended consequences. We are now confronting the ramifications of policy decisions made by General Assemblies decades ago. Had the state allowed its public universities to retain the obligation of funding the nominal cost of our pension system, the employer cost, the 11%, had the state allowed public universities to retain that obligation, I maintain there would be no unfunded liability and we wouldn't be discussing this issue today. But it didn't happen. The state took over that obligation. So what we have today is the state's precarious fiscal situation has reached the point that policymakers have no choice but to make changes in pension funding. Speaker of the House Mike Madigan and Republican leader Tom Cross pledged to hold hearings on pension reform legislation over the summer. In a joint statement, they stressed, "We are absolutely committed to reforming Illinois' public pension system for current employees. It must be done to stabilize our systems and address long-term financial issues for both the public employee pension systems and state government." And I know from experience that when Speaker Madigan issues a joint statement with the Republican leader, change is in the wind. Ultimately, the courts will be the final arbiter as to whether any significant changes to employee pension plans are constitutionally legal. But I expect the legislature to approve some plan later this fall. In fact, changes were almost pushed through in the waning hours of this last spring session, if not for the determined opposition of individuals like you. It was people like you writing letters, making phone calls, sending emails that made legislators stop and rethink what could have been a series of very rash decisions. So on behalf of my fellow university presidents around the state, I want to thank you for your efforts. They made a difference. We're very blessed to have such an active and informed group of annuitants that can mobilize in such times of need. And I appreciate all that you and the leadership of the State University's Annuitants Association have done to ensure that our legislators are aware of the plight of universities today. You are often our boots on the ground. We may not always win, but without you, these battles would never be waged. We will need you again this fall, because I am certain that these issues will once again take center stage during the veto session. And we simply must get it right this time. We cannot afford to fail. I believe it's one of those historic moments. If you think about the past and the future of the great public higher education institutions in the state, this is the issue. And it's both an issue of, for us, retirement income and health benefits, but it's also, to me, it's a moral issue. It's an issue of commitment. In my opinion, leaders in public higher education in Illinois must suggest viable alternatives that will address the very real financial distress confronting our pension systems. Once again, that's obvious. The thing is in financial distress. Some change has to take place. We can argue about the root cause, but the problem remains, and it is essential that higher education leaders put forth plans and options to help resolve this crisis. The answer to the state's pension problems should not result in diminished benefits, should not result in diminished benefits for you or for current employees. Before I conclude, I do want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Steve Cunningham, who is NIU's Vice President for Administration and Human Resources, and he's here with us, for his outstanding work behind the scenes analyzing and pointing out to the General Assembly the problems contained in the proposed pension legislation to date. He's our resident expert, and not only does he fight for NIU and staff, but he is also a resource to all the other universities, and he's well known. So Steve, we want to stand up. I want you to get some applause. You know, he's the human resource person, and I was listening to some of the commentary. The calls come in last week, and people are frantic. And, you know, they're not blaming the right people. It's not Sue's fault. It's not Sir's fault. It's not Steve Cunningham's fault. Well, normally it's not your fault. I'll let you know when it's your fault. So the future is ours to determine. All higher education, all the presidents are committed to finding a solution that is people-centered, whether those people are annuitants, current employees, or taxpayers of this great state. And I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue and for your commitment and what you've done to build higher education in this state. And also thank you for inviting me here to speak today. Let's keep up the fight, and that will help us ensure that our best days for our students and their families and our faculty and our staff and taxpayers of the state of Illinois are still ahead of us. Thank you very much.